Welcome to AI Book Highlights.
Hello.
Today we're looking into a really quite ambitious book. It's called PHILOMATH, The Geometric Unification of Science and Art.
That's right, by Robert Edward Grant and Talal Ghannam. And it really dives deep into how things like numbers, geometry, even music and science might be connected.
Yeah, it proposes these, profound links between them all. So our mission today is basically to pull out the key ideas from PHILOMATH for you.
Give you a kind of shortcut to understanding what they're getting at. This core idea about how fields we normally think of as separate are, well, maybe not so separate after all.
Okay, let's jump in. Highlight number one, numbers as a kind of divine encryption. That's the term they use.
Yeah, it sounds a bit mystical, but the idea is that numbers are like the first layer of this code, something humans have noticed and used forever, basically since day one.
From just, simple counting
Uh,
to much more complex symbols and meanings later on.
And they argue that our brains are sort of wired to do this subconsciously. Like we turn everything into numbers and ratios to understand proportions, uniformity.
How we make sense of things. And they even suggest certain numbers, these magical numbers, really resonate with us on a deeper level.
Which implies it's not just random. Our attraction to, say, the number 7 or 3, maybe there's something inherent there.
A kind of non-random connection. Interesting stuff.
It definitely makes you think about how we perceive reality, doesn't it? Are we just finding patterns, or are the patterns built in?
So if numbers are layer 1, then geometry is layer 2 of this divine encryption.
Exactly. They don't see them as separate things at all. Numbers and geometry are, like, fundamentally tangled together.
How so? How do they link them?
They say numbers act as a sort of bridge, a conduit, connecting what we see, our mind, and maybe even our soul, as they put it. And that connection leads us naturally to discovering geometry. They talk about this concept called D-space, which relates to the digital roots of numbers. When you add up the digits of a number until you get a single digit.
Right, like 27 becomes 2 plus 7 equals 9.
Precisely. And these digital roots cycle from 1 through 9. They visualize this on a D circle.
And this circle has special properties.
It does. For example, the numbers 3, 6, and 9 split the circle perfectly into thirds. And numbers in each section share that same digital root, 3, 6, or 9.
Huh.
And there's symmetry, too. Pick any two numbers directly opposite each other on the circle. Their digital roots always add up to 9. They also map out sequences, like doubling numbers starting from 1, and find these really consistent patterns in the digital roots.
So the big takeaway here is you can't really understand one without the other.
That's their core argument. They call it the geonumeric domain. To solve the big scientific mysteries, you need to study numbers and geometry together, not in isolation.
It challenges that compartmentalized way we often approach science.
Definitely. It's all about interconnectedness.
Okay, let's talk more about those magical numbers you mentioned. The book really zeroes in on things like the golden ratio, phi, and the Fibonacci sequence.
Yeah, these numbers pop up everywhere, don't they? In nature, art, architecture. People have been fascinated by them for centuries.
So phi, the golden ratio, remind us what that is again?
It's roughly 1.618. It's a specific mathematical proportion, often found in visually pleasing shapes and structures. But what's really cool is how it links to the Fibonacci sequence.
The one that goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8.
That's the one. If you take two consecutive numbers in that sequence, say 8 and 5, and divide the bigger by the smaller.
8 divided by 5 is 1.6.
Right. And as you go further up the sequence, that ratio gets closer and closer to phi, the golden ratio. It's uncanny.
Wow.
And the book goes further, exploring these really complex, like 24-fold symmetries when you map the digital roots of Fibonacci numbers onto that D circle we talked about.
It suggests a really deep structure.
It does. They also mention Lucas numbers, which are similar to Fibonacci and also tied to the golden ratio, and show up in plant growth pattern phyllotaxis.
So it's not just abstract math. It seems to describe actual physical things.
That's the implication. These aren't just numerical curiosities. They might be part of the universe's blueprint.
Okay, this next one sounds a bit out there. Numbers having a wave-particle duality, like in physics.
Yeah, it's definitely pushing the boundaries. They're extending that quantum concept to numbers themselves.
How does that even work?
Well, they model numbers as sort of waves spreading out from points in their D-space. And when these waves from two sources meet, they interfere, creating patterns.
Interference patterns, like ripples in water.
Kind of. But these patterns have numerical properties. They create specific nodes or points with unique characteristics. They even build an interference matrix based on this.
And what do they find in this matrix?
Symmetrical patterns. For instance, they notice prime numbers, and related numbers they call quasi-primes seem to cluster in specific ways, particularly around the number 60.
Around 60. Interesting.
And they talk about mirror numbers, pairs of numbers equidistant from the number 6 on their circle, and how fundamental constants like phi and another one called gamma seem to relate to these mirrored pairs. It all points towards this idea of deep symmetry and balance in the world of numbers itself.
It's a very different way of thinking about numbers, not just as static quantities.
Exactly, as dynamic entities with wave-like properties.
All right, final highlight. The hexagon and the pentagon. Why are these shapes so important in the book?
They call them perfect matches, fundamental geometric forms that also have really strong numerical ties.
How so?
When you nest these shapes inside circles, they find connections to major physical and mathematical constants. Things like E, base of natural logarithms, pi, and even c, the speed of light.
Constants showing up in geometry.
Yes. They point to calculations like E times 6 plus pi times 5 is approximately 32. Or the famous Euler's identity, EI plus 1 equals 0, which itself links E, pi, I, 1, and 0. They see the 5 and 6 from the Pentagon and Hexagon as deeply embedded in these fundamental relationships.
So the shapes themselves encode mathematical truths.
That's the idea. They also look at number sequences based on shapes, triangular numbers, square numbers, pentagonal numbers, and map their digital roots onto circles.
And find more patterns.
Unique patterns and symmetries for each type, yeah. And these patterns extend to other shapes within related groups, hinting that these geometric numeric structures might connect to actual physical properties in nature.
Wow. It really ties everything back to that core idea of unification.
Precisely. Geometry and numbers working together, reflecting the universe.
Okay, that's a lot to take in from PHILOMATH. Let's try to boil it down. What are, say, 3 actionable takeaways someone listening could actually use or think about?
Okay, first one. Try to cultivate a more holistic perspective. Don't just see science, math, art, music as totally separate boxes.
Look for the connections.
Yeah, look for the patterns, the relationships between different fields. The book suggests understanding comes from seeing the whole picture.
Makes sense. What's number 2?
Pay attention to those foundational numbers and shapes we talked about. Numbers like 3, 6, 9, the golden ratio phi, shapes like the circle, square, hexagon, pentagon.
Why?
Because they appear again and again in math, in nature. The authors believe they hold deeper significance, that they're clues to how things are structured. So just notice them more, maybe reflect on why they appear so often.
Okay, notice the fundamentals. And the third takeaway.
Be open to different ways of thinking about the universe. Ideas like numbers having wave properties or this deep interconnectedness. They're not mainstream science.
Right. Not yet, anyway.
Right. But being open to alternative frameworks, even unconventional ones, can spark new insights. It encourages you to question assumptions and explore different possibilities.
So stay curious and challenge standard views.
Exactly. Don't dismiss ideas just because they're different.
Great. So to sum up, PHILOMATH presents this really compelling, if ambitious, picture of a unified reality.
Yeah, where numbers and geometry are the keys linking science, art, and maybe something even deeper.
It definitely encourages you to look at the world with, perhaps, new eyes, seeking out those underlying connections.
A call to reconsider how we view the cosmos, seeing it as more interconnected.
Well, if this discussion has sparked your curiosity and you want to dive into the full arguments and evidence presented by the authors,
You can grab a copy of the book.
that's right. You can find a link to purchase PHILOMATH, the geometric unification of science and art, right there in the description. Thank you so much for joining us on AI Book Highlights.
Thanks, everyone.